The sun was rising gently over the dusty hills of Gungong, a quiet village east of Ouagadougou. Hundreds of people had gathered in silence for the funeral of Sulleman Traoré, the younger brother of President Ibrahim Traoré, a man loved not for politics, but for something deeper. Sulleman was a protector of life. He ran a humble but respected wildlife conservation center where he personally nursed wounded animals, eagles, monkeys, elephants, even lions. He had no fame, no power. But those who knew him said he didn't fight wars like his brother. He fought to make sure even the smallest creature could live. Now he was gone. A sudden illness, 3 days in hospital, then silence. President Traoré stood at the front of the funeral procession in a plain white robe, eyes heavy but calm. He didn't speak, didn't command. He was just a brother in mourning. Elders, youth leaders, and villagers lined up to walk past the coffin. One by one, they placed their hands on the wood in silence until someone at the back of the crowd gasped, "What is that?" At the edge of the tree-line beyond the crowd, just past the final tent, something large was moving. Slowly, quietly, a shape emerged from the bush, golden, heavy, alone. It was a lion, not running, not hunting, just walking, straight toward the coffin. Panic began to spread. People backed away. Mothers pulled children close. Soldiers reached for their weapons. But Traoré raised one hand and said firmly, "No one moves. He's not here for harm." The lion walked through the space the people had cleared as if it knew exactly where to go. And when it reached the coffin, it stopped, circled, then bowed its head and stayed still. The silence that followed, it wasn't fear. It was awe. Because everyone knew this wasn't just any lion. The lion stood still beside the coffin. Its eyes were calm, its breathing steady, its body heavy with something no one could name, something that felt like grief. The entire funeral was silent. Not a whisper, not a phone. Even the birds in the trees had gone quiet. And then slowly, the lion lay down, placing one large paw gently against the base of the wooden coffin. President Ibrahim Traoré lowered his head because he knew this lion. Everyone in the family did. His name was Kina. 10 years earlier, Sulleman Traoré had found him as a cub, injured, starving, and left behind after poachers were chased off a reserve. Most would have let nature take its course, but Sulleman refused. He carried Kina home, in a blanket, fed him by hand, and even slept near his enclosure during cold nights. He often joked, "One day this lion will bury me." No one took him seriously, but now Ka was here. One of Sulleman's close workers, a conservationist named Mayam, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. She said softly, "He came all this way alone. That means he felt it." Another old caretaker nodded. "Lions don't forget those who fed them with love." Across the funeral grounds, elders and villagers who had never seen a lion this close stood frozen, not in fear, but in disbelief. One man whispered, "Even the wild came to pay respect. This is not a beast. This is a brother." Traoré stepped forward slowly. He knelt down beside the lion, his hand resting on its mane. Ka did not move, and in a voice barely above a whisper, Traoré said, "You kept your promise. He never left you behind, and now neither did you." The lion remained by the coffin for the next hour. No one dared to move him. No one wanted to, because in that moment, it was clear this was not just a farewell. This was a miracle. For over an hour, the lion did not move from beside the coffin. He sat there silently, eyes half closed, the large muscles in his shoulders rising and falling slowly with every breath. Mourers continued to pass by now at a respectful distance, their eyes wide, their hands trembling, their hearts unsure if what they were seeing was real. A lion at a funeral sitting in peace. The village elder, dressed in a deep indigo robe, leaned toward one of the youth leaders and whispered, "This is not coincidence, this is spirit." President Ibrahim Traoré stood just a few steps away, watching. He hadn't moved either. In his face there was no fear, only sorrow and something deeper. Recognition. Then it happened. The lion turned its head and looked directly at him. Their eyes met, not for a second, not by accident. The gaze lasted for nearly a full minute, and in that moment, the air around them seemed to pause. Not a leaf rustled, not a foot shifted. Even the breeze held its breath. Witnesses say Traoré blinked once, but never looked away. And behind his eyes, something broke. Something that 1,000 speeches could never express. This was not a leader meeting a wild animal. This was a brother, meeting the final messenger of another brother, a bridge between two worlds. One political, powerful, and loud, the other natural, pure, and silent. The lion's eyes, golden and ancient, didn't judge. They didn't question. They simply said, "I was there when he loved, and I am here now that he is gone." Traoré lowered his gaze slowly and nodded once. The message was clear. And the entire funeral, hundreds of people watched with wet eyes and stunned hearts. A woman near the back whispered, "This is not grief. This is royalty, returning royalty." Later, one of the guards, who had stood still the entire time, said, "In that one look, the lion gave the president what no general could, closure." A poet from the crowd took out a small notebook and scribbled a single line. Even the king of the wild knew the heart of the man. As the moment passed, the lion slowly stood up. The entire crowd stepped back again, gently, respectfully. And what happened next left people in tears. The lion stood slowly. Its massive frame rose with quiet grace, muscles shifting under golden fur, still dusted from the savannah. It stepped back from the coffin one step, then two, then turned, as if preparing to leave, but it didn't. Instead, it turned back around. The crowd froze once more. President Ibrahim Traoré took a half-step forward, not in fear, but in anticipation. And then it happened. The lion lowered its head, but not just to sniff or stretch. It bowed deliberately, slowly. The front legs bent forward, the head lowered fully, and the lion's chin touched the dirt. Not a twitch, not a growl, just stillness, a full bow of respect. No one moved. An elder dropped his cane. A mother covered her mouth. A soldier whispered under his breath, "Did you see that?" A pastor near the rear began to cry. Even the beasts feel his loss. And then something almost spiritual unfolded. As the lion held its boo, the line of mourners, one by one, bowed too. Some dropped to their knees. Others placed a palm over their chest. A few fell fully to the ground, not from fear, but because something ancient had just taken place. A creature of the wild, untamed by man, had chosen to honor a human. Not because it was trained, but because it remembered love. Sulleman Traoré wasn't just a conservationist. He was a brother to the land. He had whispered to wounded birds, fed orphaned elephants by hand, and raised this lion from a helpless cub into a king. Now the king had returned to kneel at his brother's side. The lion stayed booed for nearly 30 seconds, then stood, turned slowly, and walked away. It didn't roar. It didn't run. It didn't look back. Just faded into the trees, step by step, like a spirit returning to where it came from. As it disappeared into the horizon, the only sound left was the quiet sobbing of the people who had just witnessed a miracle. The lion was gone, but the silence it left behind still hung in the air like smoke after a sacred fire. People hadn't moved. Some were still kneeling, others were wiping tears from their faces, and a few just stared at the forest edge, wondering if what they saw had really happened. Then, for the first time that day, President Ibrahim Traoré stepped up to speak. No microphone, No podium, just the weight of loss and a voice that now belonged to every person standing there. He placed his hand gently on the coffin and began. Sulleman was not a politician. He didn't give speeches. He didn't carry guns. He never asked for a crowd. But look around you. He has gathered the entire nation and even the wild. There were sniffles from the crowd. A woman near the back whispered, "Let him speak. Let him finish." Traoré continued. "My brother healed creatures that the world had forgotten. Animals others would fear. He would sit beside. When they were sick, he gave medicine. When they were angry, he gave space. When they were dying, he gave dignity." Then he paused, and today, when he left this world, they came back. He turned slightly, facing the tree-line where the lion had disappeared. That was not a circus trick, not a trained act. That was a soul returning a favor. That lion came because love has memory. Now facing the mourners again, he raised his voice slightly. "Let this day remind the world that we are not separate from the land. We are not above the animals. We are not rulers of nature. We are family." The crowd was still silent, not because they were told to be, but because there was nothing left to add. Traoré stepped down and walked back beside his mother, gently holding her hand. And in the days that followed, the video of the lion bowing and Traoré's speech went viral across the world. People in South Africa, Ghana, Senegal, even Brazil and Haiti shared it with awe. A lion at a funeral, an African leader who speaks with the land. This is not fiction. This is who we are. The funeral ended just before sunset, but no one rushed to leave. Even after the prayers, the silence, the final rose placed on the coffin, people stayed, not because they were ordered to, but because they knew they had just witnessed something the world would talk about for years. The lion that bowed, the president who wept in silence, the brother who was remembered not with power, but with peace. Later that evening, inside the presidential residence, Traoré sat alone with his mother. She held an old photograph in her hand. Sulleman as a boy, smiling, holding a tiny lion cub in a blanket. She didn't say much, just one line. Even the animals mourned him. That night, a state announcement was made quietly. A new wildlife sanctuary would be built and named the Sulleman Traoré Circle. But it wouldn't be a tourist park. It would be a healing ground for injured animals, rescued lions, orphaned creatures, and young Burkina Faso students to learn about care, nature, and dignity. And beside the sanctuary's entrance, a large bronze statue was placed, not of a man, but of a lion bowing beside a coffin. And at the base, just 5 words. Love has memory. So does Africa. Across the continent, the story spread like fire. Some said it was a miracle. Some said it was legend. But those who were there knew the truth. It was a moment when nature spoke louder than politics, when an animal remembered something humans often forget: loyalty, gratitude, family. And in the weeks that followed, there were quiet reports from rangers in the area. Every few days, a lion was seen returning to the tree-line where the funeral had taken place. Never roaring, never hunting, just standing, watching, waiting like he still hadn't said goodbye. Because sometimes legacy doesn't speak. It walks, it bows, and then it disappears into the trees.